Really living up to the stereotype here, all this fidgeting.
Oh yes, of course.
I am here to talk to you today about, the title is I haven't actually decided the title yet, but I think it's along the lines of what ADHD looks like in medical school, or what ADHD looks like for medical students, along those lines. How it affects medical students, who knows? We've got time, we'll decide later. And basically, obviously not a doctor, is just kind of like how I feel it kind of affected me. Thought I'd put it out there. Hopefully someone finds it useful. Wow, tripping over all my words there. Sorry. Can't speak English. I found this infographic. Is that what they call them? Infographic. I felt it was pretty accurate actually for the sort of things that I'd experienced. But, you know, good is the enemy of great, okay? So I was like, we can make that better. I would add a 6th category to the 5 they've got on there. And the 6th one I would add would be memory.
Stop. Okay.
And I'll expand later. But for this video, I thought I'd sort of discuss and provide examples of how those areas, how they can be sort of problematic, or how some medical students can struggle with them. Obviously this is not medical advice. I am not a doctor, so, and obviously not all of these things are going to happen to everyone, if that makes sense. They're also not going to all cause a problem for everyone. I hope I'm explaining this properly. So I know, for example, people with ADHD that are early everywhere, amazingly early everywhere, whereas that's obviously that's not me. No, that's not me. And then there's other people that have got really quite good time management skills, and then other people that really struggle. So everyone is different. First one is organisation. Ways this could kind of affect you in medical school. Organisation was one of my bigger areas that I was really struggling with, because it sounds really stupid, but it's I got to medical school and I was like, I don't know how to study. How do you study? What? Even though up to this point, right, I'd done obviously GCSEs, A-levels and a degree, okay? But I was just what is studying? I don't understand. So how do you take notes? Do you just write everything down? But I couldn't keep up with writing everything down. So how do you lay it out on the page? When it's time to revise, how do you go back and revise? So I just the whole thought of lectures were mad overwhelming. It's actually so, it sounds really stupid to say that. It wasn't the first time I'd done a lecture before. I'd done plenty of them at biomed. I don't know what it was. I think it was the volume of information. Okay, so yeah, right, let's talk about it. So I guess the volume of information. Med school lectures have a lot of info on them, right? How much of it I needed to retain? I guess, so for biomed, right, you'd have, or at my uni anyway, they kind of made the key concepts very clear, and those sort of motifs would come up again and again and again, right? So my undergrad, they were obsessed with cancer cell biology. So everything was about these 3-letter kinases, but you would have lecture after lecture after lecture where this stuff would come up, so you had a pretty solid idea, oh okay, that's going to be in the exam. But for medical school, you do your lecture, and I guess I sort of settled on oh, let me try and understand the big picture. But when it came to the formatives, and when it came to the exams and stuff, it was asking you about what I would consider quite a minute little detail that was like a sentence at the bottom of one slide somewhere, and that was like what they wanted you to talk for 4 marks on. So I was like, I clearly am missing something somewhere. I'm not able to like get out the information that I like need to. So I was really struggling with that. Yeah, I had no idea of how to take notes. I literally, every single block I had a different method of taking notes. Like in block 1, I like handwrote them and I could not keep up. So in block 2, I had a tablet, I had a Microsoft Surface, which is like old, very old, but I would like type stuff and that didn't work. So then in block 3, I was just like directly making flashcards. I think that was probably a better way to do it. And then in block 4, I was like making notes and then trying to make flashcards, but because it was really anatomy heavy, like the whole flashcard thing really wasn't working. And then the pandemic happened, so it all just went to poo anyway. Yeah, so I just had no clue. So my notes from first year are just like, no one knows what's happening. They're very disorganized. And then another aspect of how it could affect a medical student is also in terms of like deadlines. For me, I just could not like prioritize and like organize my deadlines. So I was always accidentally missing deadlines, basically. Moving on to productivity, let's say there's a lecture that was like 1 hour. It'd take me hours and hours to like go through it and make notes properly. And this would be after I'd have been sat in the lecture theatre, right, like listening to the lecture live and making notes. But I definitely was struggling with productivity. Everything just took me a really long time. Distractibility. So yeah, this can definitely manifest as like focus issues. So that can be like when you're in lectures, like focusing on the lecture content, or just getting like easily distracted by whatever's going on around you. And then also during like studying as well, like focusing on what you're doing when you're studying, or like presenting and things like that as well. So another one was impulsivity. So for me personally, I didn't have like as much of an issue with this in like within medical school. Like for me, my issue with impulsivity was like away from medical school. Namely, like I'm such a impulse buyer. It's actually terrible. So, because I was thinking about this the other day, and like just the amount of like money I've spent on stuff I've just not used is actually terrible. Like, so at home in Brighton, in my room, I literally bought this like 3-4 years ago. Actually, I think it's longer than that, you know. I'll go back on Amazon and like see, but I reckon I probably bought this in like 2017 sort of thing. There's a wet grinder, never been taken out of the box. I bought it off Amazon. It was £100 and something. It was quite expensive. Never used it. I think because I watched a YouTube video of like someone using a wet grinder to make chocolate, like from cocoa beans, and I was like, that is so cool, I want to try that. And I just never did it. And then what else? Impulse buys that I've got here. Oh, the sticker maker that I bought on Black Friday probably like 4 years ago, that I've just never used. I'll go get that. I actually have that. Yeah. I have a silhouette portrait. I have never used it. I have opened it. I've never used it. I don't even know if it works. But yeah, I think you can make stickers on it, which is very exciting. Yeah, so there's that. And my most recent one was this churro maker. So yeah, you know when you're in Aldi and they have that like one aisle where they've just got like loads of random stuff, like anything from like socks to like garden tools. So they had churro makers. At least that was £10, which is £10 I did not need to spend because I haven't actually used it yet. but it's cheaper than things like impulse bought in the past. So like when I was working full time, you could justify it. I'm not now. I am broke AF, so I actually need to stop. ADHD, I'm ruining my life. In a medical school context, and not for me personally, but from what I was reading online, they sort of say things like getting off task easily, so in lectures while studying. Well, that is me, but I feel like these overlap with the others, so. And then they've also got like making silly mistakes in exams and stuff like that. Like if you like read a question, you can like latch onto like one word and then be like, oh, okay, like the answer's like this, without like actually sort of reading and comprehending like the rest of the, yeah, what the question's actually asking you. Because you know, like a lot of medical school exam questions are like, I swear they're written to sort of like catch you out. Like you start reading, you're like, oh, it's this thing. And then by the time you get to the end, you're like, oh, you almost had me. You almost had me. Yeah, although having said that, like, now I'm reading this, I'm something like, I definitely made so many stupid mistakes. Okay, so next, time management. So this is definitely something I really struggle with. What was that? Let's try again. So time management. Again, this is definitely something I do struggle with. Just namely, like, when I'm doing a task, time goes by so quickly sometimes. So it can make it difficult for me to like be on time places sometimes. And then conversely as well, you can find like your study sessions are like quite ineffective. And this kind of links into what I was discussing with productivity earlier. Like knowing when to like switch from one task to like the next is again something that can be quite difficult if you're a medical student with ADHD. And then finally, memory. So for me, like it's just manifested as being forgetful AF. Like to the point where there was definitely a time period where I was like Googling what's the youngest someone's been diagnosed with dementia, because I actually thought, I was like, do I have early onset dementia or something? I used to really hate as well when I would like study something like maybe the night before or 2 nights ago and then get asked about it or questioned about it, and I was just like, oh my god, I've literally just studied this, I do know it, it should be in my head somewhere, but I just couldn't answer the question or recall the information they were asking for, and that was so frustrating. So we have talked about a lot of areas that can be problematic for medical students with ADHD. This is just stuff that sort of resonated with me. This is not medical advice or anything like that. So, bye. Thanks for watching.